Weight training was never part of my plans. I've always been the kind of man who thought that a walk in the late afternoon was all I needed for my body, my mind, and my health. But my cardiologist didn't agree. You need more muscle strength, Austin. It will help with your posture, your energy, and even your mood. I left the office laughing, but deep down I understood the message. I needed to take care of myself. It was Mike, a longtime friend, who recommended Xavier to me. Train with him. The guy is serious, he doesn't mess around, and he understands the pains of someone over 40, he said. I confess that it took me a few days to work up the courage, and even when I went, I was kind of on autopilot. I parked, entered the gym with that discomfort of someone who is out of place, and asked for him at the front desk. Xavier showed up a few minutes later. Tight shirt, well-groomed beard, dark eyes, and a steady gaze, the kind that assesses you completely without seeming rude. "Austin?" he asked, extending his hand. "That's me." His handshake was firm and confident. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you." The way he said that stuck in my head more than it should have. And I didn't know why. In the first week, I almost gave up. My body ached, my muscles were sore, and I felt ridiculous trying to lift weights with a pained expression on my face. But Xavier was always there, watching, correcting, encouraging. No yelling, no jokes. "We don't start strong, we start present," he said once after a poorly executed set. It was strange to feel so comfortable around another man. Not because he was younger, not because he was handsome. It was something else. It was the care, the way he put his hand on my shoulder, how he guided my movements with patience. And little by little, I began to notice something more in our silences. One night, after a more intense workout, I sat on the bench, sweaty and panting. Xavier knelt in front of me to adjust my shoelace, a gesture I thought was exaggerated, but I didn't stop him. He looked at me and said, "You're doing well. Really?" "Yeah, you've been too patient with me." "It's not patience. It's a pleasure to see you progress." I smiled, a little awkwardly, and I stared at him longer than I should have. It was the first time I thought, am I the only one feeling this? The weeks went by, almost without me noticing. What started as a medical obligation turned into a new rhythm, a strange and, in a way, welcome break from my routine. But what surprised me most was not the physical progress, but something else. His presence. Xavier and I grew closer with each workout. At first, everything was formal. "Good afternoon. Let's train. Adjust here. Stretch there." But little by little, the tone changed. There were longer smiles, touches that seemed to linger a little longer than necessary, conversations that went beyond sets and reps. And then the joke started. Little teases, almost imperceptible to anyone watching from the outside, but which, for me, echoed for hours afterward. Things like, "Are you going to say you don't like it when I get rough with you?" Or, "You're getting strong, huh? Soon I'll have to watch out around you." He said it laughing, always in that light-hearted way, like someone who throws a joke out there and lets it float. But I didn't know where to put that inside me. Because it wasn't just a joke. At least not for me. I started catching myself thinking nonsense. Imagining things. Blaming myself right after. After all, I was married. I had never looked at another man that way. I had never felt my body respond like that. But with him, with Xavier, everything seemed natural and confusing at the same time. I would leave the gym with my body tired and my mind on fire, as if something was awakening. Something I couldn't name and maybe didn't even want to. One Friday night, I decided to go out with my wife and some friends. Nothing fancy, just a bar near our house, cold beer, laughter, and silly conversations that helped clear my head after a long week. It was the kind of thing I used to enjoy, familiar, predictable, safe. But that night, I can't explain why, I felt restless, as if I had left a window open inside me. We were at a table in the left corner of the room, near the door. The lights were low, the ambient sound was a mix of music and conversation, and the waiters were passing by, balancing trays with clinking glasses. I had already had 2 drinks when, by chance, I looked to the back of the bar. And there he was. Xavier. Sitting at a table further away, surrounded by other people. They were laughing, talking, exchanging quick, carefree touches. Next to him was a beautiful woman, fair skin, hair tied up in a messy bun. They were together. It was obvious. Girlfriend, probably. And for some reason, I didn't want to analyze right away. It hit me. I raised my hand in a discreet greeting. He saw me, smiled, and returned the gesture with his usual calm manner, as if I were just another acquaintance there. But after that, every time I looked in his direction, even trying to hide, Ide was already looking at me. It happened at least 3 times. Maybe more. On one occasion, our eyes met for a second that felt like an eternity. I quickly looked away, embarrassed, pretending to look for the waiter. But inside, my stomach was churning. My wife nudged me, laughing at some joke. I made an effort to get back into the conversation. I replied without thinking too much, trying to smile. But the truth is, I wasn't really there. My eyes, even when I resisted, always returned to him, as if they were being pulled, as if they were no longer entirely mine. At one point during the evening, I got up to go to the bathroom. It wasn't planned. I just needed to breathe a little, to get a few minutes away from the table, away from the laughter, away from myself perhaps. I crossed the room with calm steps, dodging chairs and glasses, and entered the narrow hallway where the bathrooms were located. The light there was colder, the sound muffled. And it didn't take long someone approached. When I looked to the side, it was him. Xavier. He looked at me with that calm, confident gaze. He smiled, as if he were amused inside. "Great, Austin," he said, in a light, almost conspiratorial tone. I smiled too, surprised for a moment, but letting it slip. "With your help, I'll be even greater." We smiled together. Nothing else. But that brief moment seemed longer than any long conversation. He stayed there for a second longer, then walked down the hall. And I went back to my desk. I didn't look back. Maybe out of fear. Maybe out of respect. Or maybe because, deep down, I knew that if I looked, something inside me would never be the same again. A short time later, he returned to his desk. He walked slowly, as if in no hurry to resume his conversation with his friends, and before sitting down, he looked in my direction once more. It wasn't a casual or distracted glance, it was direct, confident, as if saying something without words, something that only I was able to hear in that silent moment between us. I tried to hide it. I turned my face away with a sheepish smile, pretending to listen to the conversation at the table, pretending I was completely there. My wife was saying something, a friend was telling a funny story, and everyone was laughing naturally, except me. Inside, my body was still trapped in that gaze. Soon after, we decided to leave. The night was getting late, and the table was starting to empty. The bill came, the goodbyes were quick, we exchanged hugs and a few hurried waves. On the way to the car, I felt the wind was colder than usual, as if the air carried something different that night. I drove in silence, my eyes fixed on the road, and my thoughts returning to the same place. She talked to me, telling me something about work or her children, and I responded with short murmurs, trying to sound present, even though I was miles away inside my head. When we got home, we took a shower, exchanged a few words, and went to bed. She lay down, turned off the light, and soon fell asleep, serene, as always. And I stayed there. The dark room, the sound of her breathing in the background, and my mind spinning in circles. That scene, so simple and brief, wouldn't leave my head. His smile next to me in the bathroom, the tone of his voice when he called me Big Austin, and the response that came out of my mouth before I had time to think, it all seemed small. But inside me, it had grown in a way I couldn't contain. I closed my eyes, turned on my side, hugged the pillow tightly, and took a deep breath, trying to push the thoughts away. But the more I tried, the more his image came back to me. It wasn't just what he had said. It was the way he looked at me. As if he saw something in me that even I didn't have the courage to see. The weekend dragged on, as if the days were passing deliberately, testing my patience. I even tried to stick to my routine, to occupy my mind with simple tasks. But a moment of silence was enough for everything to return to the same scene. The bar, bathroom, his smile, that look that unsettled me, in a way I couldn't explain. The truth is, I couldn't wait to see him again. On Monday, I made a silent decision. During dinner, I mentioned that maybe it would be better if my wife drove me to the gym that night. I said I was tired, that the traffic at night was a pain, and that after my workout I would call her to pick me up. She accepted without question, gave me a quick kiss at the gate, and left. But deep down, I knew I had a plan. I wanted to be alone when I left there. I wanted to see what would happen if I let it happen. I arrived at the gym around 9 o'clock at night. The place was emptier than usual, with only a few students scattered among the machines. The white light, the sound of weights being stacked, the faint smell of sweat in the air, it was all part of my new routine. But that night was different. Xavier was already there, waiting for me, leaning against one of the bars, looking at his phone. When he saw me, he looked up and smiled in that restrained, calm way that seemed to say more than any words could. We trained as usual. Set after set, instruction after instruction. But between us there was a silent tension, something floating in the air, like a breath that doesn't quite escape. His touches seemed slower, more careful. His sentences were shorter, the silences longer, and the looks spoke volumes. It was as if we were both stepping into unknown territory, but without straying from the path. And even though nothing had been said not there, not at the bar, something was about to happen. When practice ended, we stood still for a moment. He picked up the clipboard, wrote down my numbers, and made a comment about my progress. And I knew that if I wanted to, I could just say thank you, walk out the door, call my wife, and forget all about it. But that wasn't what I wanted. When the workout was over, I said goodbye to Xavier with a handshake and a slight smile. I tried to look natural, as if I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. But inside, I already knew exactly what I was doing. I walked to the front of the gym and discreetly leaned against a corner of the facade, right next to the side entrance where the instructors usually left. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and stood there, fiddling with it without any real intention, just to look busy, but my eyes were alert, waiting for the right moment. It didn't take long. Xavier appeared, coming out the same door, now without his gym shirt, wearing a dark sweatshirt and a simple backpack slung over his shoulder. He walked with calm, almost carefree steps until he saw me standing there. "Everything okay, Austin?" he asked, in that calm voice I recognized from afar. I looked up and tried to sound casual. "Yeah, everything's fine. I'm just trying to let my wife know I'm done working out so she can pick me up, but I can't get through. My phone's not working or something." He looked at me for a second, without saying anything right away. Then he smiled a little and said casually, "Come on, I'll give you a ride." I waved my hand, declining politely. "No, don't worry about it, it's fine." But he didn't hesitate. "Come on, I'll give you a ride. Get in." The way he said it, simple, firm, leaving no room for discussion, caught me off guard and, at the same time, pleased me. He opened the car door without waiting for an answer, and I got in. I sat in the passenger seat with my heart racing, trying to keep a neutral expression as I put on my seatbelt. He got in, started the car, and for a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Inside, I was happy and a little nervous. My plan was working. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen next, but I knew that moment was a turning point. We were there, alone, in a moving car, and something inside me said that this ride, however short, would not be just a simple way home. The ride back was quiet. The city was quieter than usual, as if the world outside was asleep, in no hurry to wake up. I looked out the window, trying to control the excitement inside me. I still didn't know what to expect from that ride, but the fact that we were there, alone, after everything, was something in itself. At one point along the way, one of the traffic lights was out. Xavier stopped the car and stared ahead in silence, his fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. Next to me, the wind blew in through the crack in the window. And then, without warning, he said, "Look to your side. See that guy in the car next to us?" I turned my head discreetly. It was an ordinary car, stopped next to us. A young man, headphones in his ears, his arm resting on the window. Nothing special. "What about him?" I asked, turning my eyes back to the road. Xavier smiled slightly. "Can you believe he wanted to go out with me?" My heart raced, out of nowhere. As if that sentence had hit a sensitive spot I didn't even know existed. But on the outside, I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, really?" I asked with a discreet smile. "And you didn't go out with him?" He laughed softly, still looking at the traffic light. "He's not my type." My eyes turned to him reflexively, and before I could stop myself, the word slipped out. "And what is your type?" He slowly turned his face toward me. The smile was still there, but now there was something different in his eyes, a more direct sparkle, more daring. "Are you sure you don't know, or are you just pretending you don't?" I was silent for a moment. The question hung in the air, floating between us like a last chance to back out. But I smiled, trying to maintain control. "Of course I don't know." He held my gaze for another second and then said, in a lower tone, "My type is here with me." For a moment, everything inside me stopped. The air seemed thicker, the city outside disappeared. I was frozen. I didn't know whether to look at him, laugh, or pretend it was a joke. But the words came out almost in a whisper. "Man, don't play with that." The light turned green, and we drove on. The car glided down the avenue, as if nothing had happened, but inside me, everything had changed. Then he glanced over at me with that half-smile and asked, "So, want to do some cardio now?" I turned my face away, pretending not to understand right away. "Depends on the kind of cardio," I replied, in a tone that was somewhere between playful and challenging. He laughed, holding the steering wheel firmly, and said as if he already knew the answer, "My apartment is nearby. Are you in?" I didn't think. I didn't analyze. I didn't look for excuses. I just said, "Sure." The rest happened as if it had already been decided. He turned two corners, parked calmly, and we climbed the stairs without saying much, as if the silence between us spoke louder than any conversation. The door had barely closed when he turned and pulled me hard toward him. The kiss came urgently, firmly, full of everything that had been held back. His hand held the back of my neck, and our bodies pressed together in an impulse that seemed to have been delayed for too long. Our breathing quickened, our touch grew hotter, and the rest was inevitable. We made love with abandon, with desire, with the hunger of people who had wanted each other for much longer than they dared admit. There was no hesitation, only intensity. Skin, mouth, hands, everything happening naturally and forcefully, as if it were the only thing that mattered that night. Then, lying side by side, still panting, he turned his face toward me and smiled. "Did you enjoy your cardio workout?" I smiled back without thinking twice. "Very much. We'll have to do that again." He replied without hesitation, "Whenever you want." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to just feel. No guilt, no fear, just desire. I glanced discreetly at the watch on my wrist and took a deep breath before saying, "I think I better go." Xavier, still lying down, just nodded with a calm smile. "Sure, let's go." We got dressed in silence, without rushing, as if trying to postpone the end of something good. The atmosphere between us was still warm, but also charged with something more difficult to name. Before leaving, he walked me to the door, as he had done before, and just put his hand on my shoulder. A simple gesture, but one that pierced me. The ride back was quiet, almost silent. I looked out the car window, trying to reorganize my thoughts, trying to put a name to what I had just experienced. When he stopped in front of my house, he just said, "Anything, call me." I nodded, got out of the car, and went inside. My wife was in the living room. When she saw me, she came up to me with a slightly reproachful tone. "Why didn't you call me?" I spoke without thinking too much, trying to sound natural. "Xavier offered to give me a ride." She looked at me with a curious expression, examining my face closely. "Your face is red, honey. Are you okay?" I tried to smile. My cheeks were still burning, I didn't know if it was from my racing heart or the heat that was still inside me. Xavier gave me a cardio workout after training, I replied with a slight laugh, trying to sound lighthearted. She just nodded with a, shrugged, and went back to the couch. She didn't say anything else. And I went straight to the bathroom, closed the door, stared at myself in the mirror, and felt, more than ever, that a new part of me had just awakened. I got out of the shower in silence, with the towel still on my shoulders, and went straight to my room. The dark, familiar room, the same as every night, but today, somehow, everything seemed different. I lay down slowly, feeling my body lighter and, at the same time, heavier. I stared at the ceiling for a few minutes, listening only to my breathing. I tried to organize my thoughts, but it was as if each one pulled another, like loose threads that never connect properly. What happened today? I still don't know how to describe it. I don't know if it was an impulse, a hidden desire, or something much deeper that I had been ignoring. All I know is that it was real, that I felt it, that I wanted it. I don't know what will happen from now on. I don't know if I'll be able to hide it, if I'll want to do it again, if I'll regret it. I just hope everything goes well. Or at least that I have the courage to deal with whatever comes. My name is Austin. I'm 43 years old. I'm married. And that was my first experience with another man.